Hi everyone. Um, even though many people say writing is a lonely business, I'm here to challenge that and tell you that it ain't. Absolutely not. Yes, we all write our own story, but with writing sessions like this, we write together essentially. And there are many more reasons that writing is not a lonely business, but we will get into that later on. Right now, we will do writing sessions. And for those who don't know me, my name is Ilse. I am a magical wielding dragon companion and creator of worlds, and I'm here to help you on your author journey. And today we do that with several writing sprints, and I have a few writing prompts for you to use in writing sprints. And we will talk a bit about outlining and, well, basically anything else you'd like to talk about. So if you just joined in, please join in the chat. Let me know what you'd love to talk about. Any writing things, of course. And every now and then, some other topics might pop up. But I try to keep it mostly at writing because, after all, that is what we're here for today. I noticed that I totally forgot to set up my lighting. So if you give me one moment, I will turn on the lights and I'll be back with you on the camera. With a bit of luck, you can still hear me. Um, like I said, see, there's one light. And here's another. So that should really help, and this one should help as well. And that way we will have proper lighting during the stream. That will be way better. And now you can properly hear me as well again. And today, like I said, I have a few writing prompts for you. I will get into that later on. First, I want to have a quick, well, shall we say, recap of this last week. Last Sunday, I told you guys that I had started my outline for the entire series. I left Najat in a place where he was unconscious. He's still in the castle, in the sick room for now, the hallway, whatever I'm gonna call it. Haven't decided on that yet. And I thought that was the best moment to leave them all there and just write the outline right now, because there is so much that I need to discover and things that I need to plan out, and not only for what's already going on, but also for the whole rest of the series. I mean, there's so much that will play in this series, and things that will already find their base in this first book. I won't say the first chapter. Well, potentially the first chapter already. Let me check back in the outline. Yeah, in the first chapter already. There might already be something in there that will have its influence on the foundation of the story. That is what my outline is. That is basically what any outline is. It is the foundation of your story. And for me, my outline is usually quite simple. It's just key phrases and keywords, a little summary, maybe one or two sentences. When there's really a lot of information that I really want to be sure that I include in the chapter, then I will write a paragraph or maybe two, but normally I don't. And I don't include all kinds of tiny details unless it is a very important detail. And in this case, it is the same. And for me, that works the best, because I know that I need that freedom to divide, how shall I say this? I need the freedom to write and deviate from my outline where necessary. And if it makes the story better, then it's all for the best. And sometimes I find that it might not immediately make the story better, so I will remove it to my world building or to character information, and not keep it in the story. But that is usually something I do in later drafts and not in my first draft. Sometimes I also find out that these side stories, these sidelines, may not have been an explicit part of the outline, but in the end they are becoming, or they might become, or maybe they were they were, well, not intentionally, but underlying the base of that chapter, or the base of the story. So that is why I give myself the freedom to deviate from the outline, to see if I can make the story better with that deviation, and to see if I can make the characters better. And I mean, I've been in the past, I've been surprised by characters that showed up, also before I started to write Naja and Nijad, before they ever made their appearances. Um, they were there were other characters in the original first book that I had been writing that originally were just side characters, or maybe not even that important. They might have been simply sort of world building characters, but nothing really major. And then as the story progressed, they became larger characters. So that's also something that I discover while writing. And that is the freedom I give myself when deviating from the outline. So it's not only the storyline, but it's also the characters and world building pieces that might pop up, which I find are better than what I originally thought. So, or originally discovered or researched, etc., etc. So that is how I use outlines. And I know there are other authors who have very detailed outlines and who really use that, to write to write their chapter, and for me that doesn't work. And that is, I feel, the beauty of this craft, because writing is a craft after all. Making stories, discovering stories, is a craft, and we can hone that to perfection the way each of us need. And for me, that is a more general outline, while for another author it may be a very detailed outline. And another author may just wing it and not use an outline at all. That's also possible. And that is the beauty of the craft of writing. We each have our own process, and we each work in different ways. I mean, if I look at it, I'm an author who writes mostly chronological. I've been known to write pieces of, let's just say, later chapters in the book, or even pieces of books that come way later in the series, because it wouldn't let me go. Those pieces just simply wouldn't let me go, and they kept taking place and kept taking stage in the back of my mind. And that is when I decide to write that chapter or write that piece, because it simply takes up so much space in the back of my mind that I feel that I have no other choice. But once that's finished, I will go back to what I was originally writing. But I also know there are authors who basically just well, that's really generalized, but they basically write whatever comes up, and later on they will put things in chronological order. For example, Diana Gabaldon, I know that she doesn't write in chronological order. I've heard her saying that in interviews, and for me that doesn't work. But for her, it works perfectly, and she writes such awesome books with it, with her system. And that's what I mean. Each of us uses a system that works for us personally, and that is what is important when you are writing. If a system doesn't fit you, if it doesn't work for you, then change the system. Just if a very detailed outline doesn't work for you, then don't use a very detailed outline. If pantsing, in other words, just winging it and working without an outline at all, if that is what works for you, then just wing it and don't use an outline at all. Your writing is not about using a specific system. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I do remember that we had to write our essays indeed with a specific system. We didn't have freedom with that, and I found it very hard. And I remember that we also had to write short stories. I mean, we couldn't write a novel back then. We didn't have the time for that in class. So we were supposed to write short stories. I was never able to do that because, I mean, that's not for me. Short stories, simple. But I do remember that we were supposed to follow a system. I don't remember exactly what the system was anymore, but we had to follow that system, and if we deviated from it, it wasn't good and it wasn't appreciated, etc., etc. So that partially kept me back in writing. I remember that. And now that I just simply use my own system and I do use an outline, but it's not detailed, and that works for me. And I have extensive world building because my mind just can't seem to stop building my world. That's so, yeah. I don't know. That's how my mind works. But it doesn't mean that I use each and every detail of my world building that I found. I use the details that I actually need in the story, and that is something I can advise everyone. World building is awesome to do, but you can get lost in what is also called affectionately the world builder's disease, which essentially means that you get lost so much in world building that you don't get to writing anymore. And that's something you should try to prevent. And in my case, I kind of try to prevent that with giving myself the freedom in my outline to deviate from the outline, and to not include all those tiny details. Those tiny details will come in the story, and if I don't have the details, I'll just go on writing. And if I find that I need certain details later on, I will mark that in my text. I might mark it in my outline as well, but at least I will mark it in my text. I mean, my manuscript is riddled with, or covered, I should say, in pieces of text that have a yellow background and that are bold and that have a different color of text, to make sure that I pay attention to those details that I still need to figure out, that I still need to research and still need to discover, because I haven't discovered those, and apparently I needed the details. So yeah, that's also part of the freedom that I find, or I give myself in the outline and in my writing, because that works for me. And I encourage you all to find the freedom within yourself to deviate from a system that you set up if the system doesn't work for you. If someone else's system doesn't work for you, then use your own. Set up your own system, or change to someone else's system. It's one of the things I like about what Brennan Sanderson said in one of his lectures. What he says in his lectures are just guidelines. They can help you, but if they don't help you, then don't use them and use something else. And that is what I love about it. And it's the craft of writing has such a variety amongst authors. And I mean, even amongst authors who have had the same classes and the same teachers, you may find that in the end they just use other systems, and they use another way of outlining and another way of writing, and that works for them. And after all, we do not all write fantasy series like I do. We do not all write contemporary fiction, or historical fiction, or non-fiction. I mean, the world would be far less enjoyable, I think, if we all would write the same, and if we would all write in the same way, with the same system, with the same outline, with the same setup in your story. There are so many ways to write, and that is what is important. So find your joy in your own way of writing. There is no wrong way, as long as your way works for you, as long as your way of outlining works for you. That is what is important. So I encourage you to use that to develop your own way of writing and your own way of using an outline or not using an outline. Develop it in your own way. Make sure that it works for you. It doesn't have to work for your best friend, your best writing friend, or it doesn't have to work for me, or for I don't know which other author. It has to work for you. That is what is important, and that is what I'd like to encourage you to do in the future, and perhaps also during the upcoming writing sessions. So, speaking of writing sessions, let's get into the first one, and I have a writing prompt which is inspired by a news article I saw passing by, or I saw in the headlines earlier this week. Yesterday or the day before that, I don't remember. There were the pillars of light in the sky, and there was in Sweden, if I'm correct. And the pillars of light is something, or at least that is what my information tells me. I'm not exactly sure if that is indeed correct. But the pillars of light is not a phenomenon like the aurora borealis. The pillars of light in the sky apparently is really terrestrial, and is something that is, if I understand the information correctly, but please correct me if I'm wrong, either in the chat or later on in the comments if you see this. If I understand it correctly, the pillars of light are caused by light coming from the earth, going up into the sky, the light we all produce with our lamps and lanterns, etc., etc., and that hits certain ice crystals in upwards in the sky, And apparently at that moment you get those pillars of light. um, and it was in Sweden, I think, this week. um, and I've seen about it. I've read about it a few times in the last couple of years. So I don't know if it's becoming something more common nowadays because of all the light that we put out in the air, in our modern days, or if something has changed in the sky, in the air, that causes these pillars of light to become more frequent. But yeah, it's beautiful to see. Unfortunately, I do not have an image right now because I totally forgot to download it and to look it up because I was working on my outline. um, but please look them up. Pillars of light in the sky. I mean, it's beautiful to see. Um, so my writing prompt for you today with this writing session is that your character is in one way or another confronted with these pillars of light in the sky. What does she do with it, or he? What does it mean to her? Um, is it something like I just described? Or do you have a fantasy world where these pillars of light have a completely different cause? Maybe they are actually completely natural, like the aurora borealis. Um, Let me know in the comments, let me know in the chat what you did with it. And let's start our first writing session of 25 minutes. I I almost forgot to tell you that I use a kind of Pomodoro technique. I do writing sessions of 25 minutes, and then I will have a short break to see where we stand and maybe take a bathroom break or whatever, or to grab a drink or a snack or whatever. And then we will go on to the next writing session. So I wish you all a lot of fun with our first writing sprint, and see where your characters take you. May your story flow, and happy writing! And that is the end of our first sprint. How did it go for you guys? I managed to write a summary for a couple of chapters, of 4 chapters to be exact. It did go pretty okay. I remember originally I had been thinking about why Naja would be already in Dragon City while the delegation hadn't arrived yet. And as it turns out, I have found a solution for that. But I can't tell you about that yet, because that would mean that I would have to spoil things, because this is one of those things that will tie into the foundation of the story. So I can't tell you guys anything about that yet. But I'm pretty satisfied with the parts of the outline I've written so far, so that's a good thing. And I can lift a tiny piece of the veil. The flutter nymphs are involved as well. And no, it's not yet everything I have already written about Naja and Najat in the background story. This is before that whole part that I have written the last few months. So it's going to be interesting, and there is a lot more going on behind the scenes, so to speak. It will be fun, I hope. There is a lot of intrigue, a lot of scheming going on already, and it's just chapter 10. I mean, we haven't reached the bulk of the story yet. This is just chapter 10, or at least at this moment, I think it's going to be chapter 10. Depending on how things go, it might change in the future. That is also the freedom I give myself with the outlines. I do have a chapter order, but if it turns out that certain parts in the outline need to be earlier on or later on, or if I need to insert another chapter with something else, or remove a chapter with something, then I give myself the freedom to do that, which of course means that the numbers of the chapters will change, but that's okay. At this moment, I am at chapter 10 in the outline of the entire series. I'm very curious to see how the outline of the entire series will turn out, and how many chapters it will, well, in the outline it will have. I mean, I have no idea how it will turn out in the end. I remember that for the original first book, I wrote an outline that had originally, I think, about 50 chapters, and then it became somewhere in the 60s, and then it became somewhere in the 80s or 90s. So yeah, those things can change. And well, like I told last time, I decided to make an outline for the entire series now, because there is so much that's going on and so much that will play in the future. My apologies. So much that will play in the future, but also so much that will have an influence on the future of the story, that I simply have to write an outline for the entire series. It will give me the pointers what to look for, and also keep a check on everything that needs to be foreshadowed and things that are foreshadowed, and keep a check on characters and items, and well, basically everything that needs to be in a good order to make the story work. So it's going to be a challenge, but I like it. This is a challenge I like. I don't mind. So yeah, chapter 10 in the outline, and I've been both in Naja's kingdom and in Dragon City, so I already have parts of both. Um, in this first part, well, let me put it this way. I think it will take a while before we will get to see anything from the White City, the Mage City. Um, Simply because I expect it won't be necessary yet. But things might change. I mean, I might discover things, reasons why it might be necessary to go to the White City. Um, and to, well, there will be mages. That is for sure. I mean, in the background story, um, I already told you guys that in the background story, Rowena, who's a powerful healer, and her husband come from the White City, and they are in Dragon City, and which is a good thing when Najat returns from that southern village that can't be the most southern village, because Dragon City was supposed to be the most southern village. So there's still a world building issue that I need to solve. But anyways, Rowena and her husband came to Dragon City from the White City, and they were visiting friends there. And this was too much luck of Najat, because Rowena is now able to treat him. That will come, of course, later on in the series, in this first book, and it means, or it means that is at least one of the parts where we will see the mages. I don't expect that we will see anything, or that I will see, and you guys in the future will see anything of the White City before that, because I don't expect that it is needed, but it might. I don't know yet. Things that are happening in the previous first book, in the original first book, are things that haven't been set into motion in the open, sorta. So there are things that I expect I might find hints about, but that will not yet be explicitly shown in the White City. So that is why I expect I won't see anything about the White City yet. So it will be interesting to discover how that goes, and when we will find um, things of the White City. My apologies again. I did sleep for a couple of hours this afternoon and this morning, all taken together. It's still something I need to do after I've worked. That's the downside of having long COVID. So for everyone who was wondering about that, yeah, that's a real thing still. Um, but I won't talk about that right now. I'm not in the mood for that. I'd much rather talk about writing. So, like I said, I don't expect I will see a lot of the White City prior to Rowena healing Najat. Um, but it all depends. I mean, it might be that she. I mean, they won't. Let me put it that way. It takes quite some time to travel from the White City to Dragon City. So you won't see Rowena and her husband traveling from the White City to Dragon City in the time frame I'm writing right now, or I don't expect them, at least. I don't expect that to happen. Um, it's because I still need to figure out how long it takes to get from Naja's kingdom to Dragon City. But at the same time, have the feeling that it is more like it's more like the canal between the UK and France and the Netherlands in a way. Um, it might be a bit wider, but it won't be an ocean. I mean, it won't take weeks to travel from Naja's kingdom to Dragon City. It might take, I don't know, maybe a week. I will have to check that. I'm not quite sure about that, but I expect that it will take maybe a week um, for her and her team to arrive in Dragon City and the place she needs to go to for her assignment about the flutter nymphs. Um, so yeah, that's that that is a time frame, and from what I've discovered so far, the time it takes to travel from the White City to Dragon City is way longer than that. So I mean, you won't travel that in the same time frame. So I don't expect to see Rowena and her husband. I still need to name him as well. But I don't expect to see their traveling from the White City to Dragon City. Um, that's one of the interesting things when you start writing an outline. And I mean, I have thought of a lot of things in the world building, but there are still a few things that I'm not quite sure about. I mean, I know with the dragons, it can take several days for them to arrive from Dragon City to the White City. They have to. That's what I know from the original first book. They have a stop somewhere in a swamp area, and they probably have another stop along the way before they arrive at Crossroads, and from there to the White City. So flying with the dragons takes a couple of days. And the dragons fly faster than horses can ride. And Rowena and her husband travel by horse, or at least I expect they will travel by horse. I'm not entirely sure about that yet because, like I told last time, I think Rowena's family heritage is a naval heritage, or rather a water heritage. Her family line comes from a water line, as in literally they used to live in the water. So it might also be that they travel over water. I'm not sure about that yet, because Rowena's husband most definitely isn't from a species that used to live in the water. So there are still a few things I need to find out. I mean, originally in the first book, or in the original first book, I should say, I had two characters traveling by boat, by a sail ship, and that would take quite a while as well to travel from the White City to Dragon City. So, and that was by ship, by sail ship. And that is one of the reasons why I think Rowena and her husband will already be in Dragon City, and we won't see them traveling from the White City to Dragon City. So there are a few things that I need to figure out in the timeline. and in the world building, but that's okay. That is why this stage is there. It is to figure out the timeline, it is to figure out the world building, and to see if characters can be where they are supposed to be, and to fix it if they can't be where they are supposed to be. But if you need them there, then you need to figure out how you can get them there and how much time they need to get there. So that is um, that is one of the goals in for me in this phase, in this stage of writing. Um, Despite me having written already an interesting part of this prequel, or well, not prequel anymore, of this first part of the series, and having written already a greater part of the original first book, which will now change heavily because of Naja and Ajat's entrance and things that happen in their story in the beginning of the series now. So I expect the original first book will be quite different than what it was originally. But that's okay. That's okay. That's all part of it. That's part of the writing process, and that is why I need this series outline, um, because it will help me get a grip on the rest of this on the rest of the series, and not only the what is now the first book, but also all the books that will follow. And it is one of the what I feel is one of the fun parts of doing this is figuring out which characters are there, figuring out what the timelines are, where can a character be, where can an item be, where can a dragon be, what can they know, how can they get certain information, all things like that. And it's, how shall I say that? It's a challenge, but it's a challenge in a good way, and I like that. It's a puzzle of sorts, if you want, and that's also one of the things I love about our craft. You see so many things coming together in writing. I mean, it's not just writing a story. You develop characters, you develop a world, especially if you're writing a fantasy world. But also, if you're writing a contemporary fiction, you still need to develop the world of your story. And I mean, it can play in Amsterdam or New York or I don't know, Jakarta. Just name a city, any city or any village on Earth. It can play there, and you still need some world building. You need to know where certain buildings are, how much time it takes to travel from one side to the other side of the city. And you can also adjust things as you need them to be adjusted for your story. If you need, I don't know, some bakery to be in a neighborhood where your character lives while it originally isn't even there, you can just put it there. Just make sure that it is logical to be there at that moment in time and at that location. But you can put it there, and I mean that's the fun thing. And the same goes if you are writing a future story or a sci-fi story, a dystopian story. Um, there are so many things you can play with, and that most definitely is true when you are writing a high fantasy story. A high fantasy story, for those who don't know, is a story that plays in a world that you have created entirely. It doesn't play on Earth. It doesn't play on a future Earth. It doesn't play um, in a dystopian version of Earth or in a historic version of Earth. Nothing at all like that. It plays on a completely different planet, in a completely different world. It might even be a completely different universe for all I care. Um, it might not even have anything to do with our own universe and everything we live in. Um, you make up your world, you make up your universe, and that, I mean, that is, it gives you so much freedom to play with all kinds of things, and I love that. I really love that, and it gives you the freedom to play with all kinds of things, to literally make your perfect village or make your perfect city or country or kingdom or city state or whatever. And it helps you develop your characters and your storyline, and that is so beautiful. And not only that, you develop your characters. I mean, let's say you're writing a contemporary fiction. You develop your character. It can be based on whomever you have met, a family, friends, a complete stranger on the street. But you create that character. You create all the characters in your book, and you let them live a life. You let them experience all kinds of things that happen in life, and with I mean, it is said a picture can paint 1,000 words, but a word can also paint 1,000 pictures, because that one word can mean so many things for so many people that it won't always be the same for everyone. An elf, for example, one of Tolkien's elves can be vastly different than, I don't know, think of any elf, think of any fairy. It all depends on how you interpret things. Gnomes can be different, leprechauns, dragons. Dragons can be different. I mean, just look at the difference between European dragons and Asian dragons. And I do mean in myths and folklores, um, and stories, and well, basically everything. Um, they are vastly different. They are viewed upon oftentimes also vastly different. And that's also one of the many things, one of the many parts of our craft as an author, that help us paint a completely different picture for anyone who reads our books, anyone who reads our stories. Because every reader will interpret your story in their own way. They will interpret the way you describe your character in their own way, and the vision they might have after reading your story might be completely different from what you have while writing your story. And let's say your story gets published, and let's say your story gets chosen to become a television series like Outlander or The Discovery of Witches, from respectively Diana Gabaldon and Deborah Harkness. Apparently, Diana Gabaldon had a different view on Sam, or not on Sam, on on Jamie Fraser, the way he would look. While if you ask the fans, they see the perfect uh, Jamie Fraser in Sam Heughan. If I look at the discovery of witches, I had a completely different idea for oh, what's his name? I spontaneously have lost his name. Let me look at it. Matthew. Matthew. That's it. Matthew Good I'm sorry. Matthew Good is the actor, and Matthew de Clermont is the character. And there's also and okay, I just see someone completely surprising appearing. Toby Regbo apparently plays Jack Blackfriars. I did not see that one coming, but it's okay. It's interesting. That's interesting. I'm so far behind on that series. But anyway, Gallow Glass, Gallow. Oh, what's his name? Come on. Let me see if I can find it. Gallowglass, yeah. Stephen Cree as Gallowglass. Now, don't get me wrong. Stephen Cree is a wonderful actor, but him as Gallowglass in The Discovery of Witches is not what I would have expected. I don't know. He just doesn't fit my view of Gallowglass. But that's the fun part of writing, and that's the fun part of reading. Every reader has his or her own vision of a character, and of course the author especially has his or her vision of a character. I mean, I have, like I told in a previous live stream, I have certain actors and photo models that I have in mind, who are essentially the model of my characters, because that helps me visualize things. And with Naja and Najat, for example, I saw these two actors and I just immediately saw Naja and Najat. That was, for me, it was perfect. There was no question about it. Another one is Umer. There's no question about it. He's perfect. The one that I have as a model for this character. So that's the fun part of it, but it all depends. Well, no, it doesn't. That is my vision. Let me put it that way. That is my vision of how I see the characters. But once you get to read the story, you might see someone completely different in them, in the way that I describe them, or in the way that you interpret my description of them. So that's going to be very interesting to see that, and it's one of the things I love about writing. I love about our craft. We make the story, and our readers each interpret our story and our characters and the world that we create. Every reader interprets that in his or her own way, from his or her own point of view and experiences, and things they know and they've learned, etc., etc. And we as authors build that into our stories as well. I mean, we use our own experiences and things that we learned. Often they say, write what you know, and I say write what you want to know. And write what you want to know and use the experience that you have. The experience that you have is the feelings, life experience that you've been through, emotions, etc., etc. And what you want to know is either what you already know or things that you want to know. If you want to know how, oh heck, martial arts work because you need that in your story, then you can research that and you can use that in your story. If you make your world, you are the one who knows everything about your world, or everything that's needed to know about your world. Let me put it that way. I mean, Brandon Sanderson said that perfectly. He said, make sure that you write one thing very well, that it is very well pictured and explained and everything, and your readers will believe that you did everything, or that you did the same for everything else. Well, you did not do that, but you just give hints, enough hints to suggest that you did. That is, I think, a very good advice about world building. I mean, you create your world, you create what your story needs. That is also how I view world building. Even before I knew about Brandon Sanderson, and even before I listened to any of his lectures. Yes, world building is awesome to do, and you can clearly get really lost in it. But I try to. That is why I both write and build my world, because during my writing, I discover what I still need to work on in my world. For example, that southern village that plays a role in the first part of the series. For some reason, I found that this southern village lies more southern than Dragon City on the continent of Natuan. But Dragon City was supposed to be the most southern village in Natuan, to get kind of together with Devil's Port, but Devil's Port was supposed to be a little bit higher than Dragon City, with the coast going up. So I either made a mistake there, which is very well possible, or I will need to do some extra world building. But of course, it's also possible that this village that still needs to be named, I mean, that's also part of world building that I still need to do. I still need to name that village. And I'm now 4 months into that. 3 months. November, October a bit, November, December. Yeah, 3 months. 3 months. So this southern village still needs a name. But it's very well possible that Dragon City is indeed the most southern part, the most southern village, because it's in the tip of Natuan. For example, I did not quite have that in mind, or have it visioned for Natuan. Natuan's southern coast, from what I thought, was more flat. Did not have that tip, but it's possible that it has that tip. I'll need to do some more research on that. And it is possible that Devil's Port is on one side, a little bit more to the north, while this southern village is somewhere else, possibly again a bit more up north, but more, for example, on the east side or on the west side, depending on how you look at the map, from whose point of view you look at the map. So those are things I still need to discover, and it's important that I discover these things, but because the ancient forest, which plays a major role in this first part of the story, in this first part of the series, is there. So I need to figure that out. I need to figure that out. So there's a lot going on for which I still need to do world building, and it is going on there because I originally did not have in mind to use any of that. I mean, that was just land that the dragon companions would fly over, and it wouldn't matter in any way. And now it matters. So yeah, I'll need to fix that. I'll need to do some world building for that. And the more I'm now writing things that play in and around Dragon City and Devil's Port, the more I find that I discover new information about Dragon City, about the cave that Dragon City lies in, and about the main part of Dragon City. I now envision it more to be like a little bit like Minas Tirith of Middle Earth, inside that huge cave. But not. I mean, it's not exactly like Minas Tirith. I mean, it's also built up in layers. So it's kind of like having the height of Minas Tirith, and having that as the main focal point of Dragon City in the cave. And at the same time, there are smaller parts, lower areas, that are part of that whole Dragon City city-state in the cave. And there are so many things going on, and that's just, I mean, the rivers that are there, and in the past I envisioned rivers to be there, but I hadn't really had more information about that. I hadn't really thought about that, discovered more, and now I find that these rivers in Dragon City are fed by underground rivers, and they will in the end merge into one big river that falls down onto the plains outside where the dragons fly over. So that's also a part that I hadn't discovered yet, and that keeps evolving the more I write about Dragon City and Devil's Port and everything that plays in Dragon City and around Dragon City and Devil's Port and things like that. I think that I will find more of Naja's kingdom as well, because I mean, originally I hadn't even thought about that. Well, not in this way. The kingdom, which also doesn't have a name yet, it was there, but it was more like in the back of my mind. It was there, but not with a huge function. And possibly it was there because, or not possibly, it was there because in the original first book, in the well, no, not in the original first book, probably the second book. I think I planned it for the second book. We discover that the silk that is being used in Dragon City originally comes from that kingdom, due to the agreement, the alliance agreement they have, and that's a whole complicated thing, and that will come into the books, and more and more will become known about it. Also about the distant history, because that is a history that goes way back. I mean, it's not decades; it's centuries upon centuries that history goes back. So it's really really old. It's a really old alliance, but with new kings and new generations, things may change. So that is what we find here in the Tergaenae Chronicles. Things do change. So yeah, um, that's where I see that I still need to do a lot of world building. While I already have done a lot of world building, but the world building I have done um, is partially for what I am writing now and for this outline, but also for the background story of Naja Najat, or rather now the first part of the series. And it's world building for later on. And I mean, I've much more developed, for example, Crossroads and the White City and Greyhaven. Those are things I've developed far more than Dragon City. I'm not quite sure yet why. Maybe because way deep down, wasn't, where I didn't know it consciously yet, Naja and Najat were already there, and I needed to discover them to build out Dragon City further and to build out that Naja's kingdom and other things that will become important, like why Naja, as the eldest daughter of the king, gets to be in the kind of team that she is in. I mean, she's not from a fighting lineage, but she's a fighter and more. So how did she get there? Why? What were the reasons to get there? And how did the people deal with that? If they even know about it. So those are all things that I still need to discover. And I need to discover it because I am writing about it, and that's the balance I talked about earlier, the balance between world building and your writing. You need to work on your world building as much as your story needs it. Of course, you can build your world as much as you want, but try not to get lost in the world building. I've done a lot of world building, and a few things were just because I liked it and they were not necessarily needed in the story. But other things are pretty vital for the story. So yeah, it's a balance, and it's a fine line between building an entire world and making a small story in it, or building your world and writing your story in that world, but also in combination with that world. So yeah, that's the balance between world building and writing, and that is why I think it is important to do both at the same. Well, I mean, you can't with one hand build your world and with the other hand, right? I mean, that's a bit hard, but it works in conjunction with, is that conjunction? Yeah, I think it works together, and there is no need to first build your entire world before you start to write. I mean, for the Tergaenae Chronicles, I had to do some world building first before I started to write, because the original idea I had was dragons and their companions, and originally I thought, okay, they live on Earth, and then I started to think, okay, if you have a dragon the size of, I don't know, a small airplane, how the heck are we going to feed them? I mean, we already have problems feeding our citizens. We already have problems feeding our livestock. How the heck are we going to feed dragons the size of that? And it is not like in Game of Thrones where there are 3 dragons. No, no. Tergaenae has loads and loads of dragons. And there are tiny dragons that can fit in the palm of your hand or even on your fingertip. But there are also huge dragons that are the size of a small airplane or maybe even bigger. Well, not the size of an airbus because they are huge, huge. But yeah, dragons can become very big. So at that moment, I thought, okay, so we need to feed them. How are we going to do that? Because I mean, that's already a problem here on Earth. So feeding them, that's hard. And where are they going to live? I mean, we can't just put them, I don't know, somewhere on a savannah or whatever, and just let them live there. And I mean that would be weird. But I couldn't see them living in the city or I mean, on a skyscraper. Nah. So how are we gonna do that? And that is when the idea of Tergaenae started to form, and the idea of a completely different world from ours, which is so vastly different and has so much magic. Because the magic that was something, okay, I needed that, I wanted that. Not so much needed, but I wanted that. I wanted magic and I wanted dragons, simply because I like that. So I needed to do some world building before I could start writing, because I simply couldn't imagine having dragons living here on Earth. Well, at least not the dragons that can have companions on their backs. So yeah, that was truly an issue. So that is why I did some world building first, because I needed it. I needed it for my story. And of course, it was a lot of fun to do. I mean, no doubt about it. Don't get me wrong. I love world building, and I still love it, and I can still get lost in it. But that was a part that I needed. It was essential for me to be able to write my story. And then I, at some point, started to develop my story and to write an outline and write the story. And then I found that while writing the story, I needed more information. I needed to know, for example, how on earth it was possible that certain characters hadn't met in, let's say, more than a decade while they lived in the same city. And I was like, but how? I mean, they live in the same city. How can they not meet? Until I started to look at my old hometown, and I thought, okay, I'm starting to get the picture now. And if you look at a large city, then it becomes clear why people won't meet. Especially if you don't have public transport and cars and such things. If you are depending on walking and on horse and carriage and things like that, then it becomes a lot harder to simply in a day go from one side to the city to the other and back and meet each other and just happen to see each other. It's not quite logical. So yeah, that's again where I needed to do some world building to give me that logic, to give me that insight as to why those characters couldn't have met, because it was simply impossible for them to meet in that decade. Also because of the restrictions they had gotten, but also because of the size of the city they live in. And so there were more things like that why I needed to do some more world building before I could develop more parts of my story again. So that is where the balance between world building and writing is very important, and where it becomes necessary to either do some extra world building or to be able to simply keep on writing.
So yeah, that's how I look at world building and writing in balance, in combination with um, not only writing your story but also writing your outline, because when you are writing your outline like I am doing right now, you will already see things where you need more world building simply because you haven't developed it yet, um, or you haven't developed the details that you need to make sure that things in your story work. Um, and that is what I see in my outline now as well. I see new people coming up, which in hindsight were logical to have, but they were not people I had thought of. Um, I mean, Naja has a team and gets assignments, so it's logical for her to have a commander because she's not the commander. It's logical for her to have a commander who gives her the assignments, who gives her team the assignments. Um, but I haven't thought about that yet. So that's another character that is becoming part of my story. Um, the kingdom, Nasha's kingdom, the kingdom where she comes from, needs to be developed a bit more. Because right now it's a kingdom in the south, and they travel from that kingdom to Dragon City. Basically, that's it. There's nothing or almost nothing about the culture. While this is a kingdom where the most important and the most expensive silk comes from, the most exquisite silk, um, and silk that is used in Dragon City. So and oh, I would have to go into the details, into the history of how that relationship between those between the city state of Dragon City and that kingdom came to be. That's something for another time. But that is a culture I still need to build. Um, is it needed? At least some parts of this culture are needed. So I need to develop that. And I hadn't thought about it yet because originally it wasn't quite needed, because it was mentioned every now and then, but there were no real issues about it, so it wasn't quite needed as much. Well, now I really need it because I needed to show how things work for Naja and her team and her parents and things like that. So I do need to develop there some things, for that kingdom. So I've got some world building ahead of me, while at the same time I'm writing this outline. So talking about the outline, because I think we've talked enough about the balance of writing and world building. Um, I want to do one last writing session for today, and then I'm gonna call it quits because, well, I have dinner coming up. It's almost 5 o'clock here in the Netherlands, so I have dinner coming up. So I need to prepare that. I'm on my own, so I need to prepare that. Um, so one more writing session of 25 minutes, and I have one more writing prompt for you, and I'm going to see if I can. I have an image for this. Let me see if I can pull it up. Um, let's see. And my apologies for the sounds. I'm apparently I have a little bit of a cold, or rather, probably I forgot to take my meds this morning and yesterday morning. So it might also simply be um, the hay fever, which is playing up, which is a thing as well. And you might think, I mean, it's been freezing outside, so why do you have why would hay fever play up? Well, yeah, this week it's been freezing, but before the New Year, sometime between Christmas and New Year, the hazels were already blooming. And when they start to bloom, your hay fever starts, or at least those who have the birch allergies, like I do. When the hazels start to bloom, then your hay fever starts to play up. And that's the case for me. And although I have taken my meds, I basically always take my meds because these last few years I have hardly had any months where I did not need my meds for my hay fever. But I forgot. I was in limited time. I didn't have enough time in the mornings to take my meds. Um, so I need to keep that in check better. That's one of the things I can show you, or I can give you as another writing prompt or world building prompt for your world. Hay fever medication, but that's not what I was looking for. But that is why you hear me making these sounds every now and then. Okay, let's see. You can't see it properly yet, so I'll have to make it a little bit smaller. Yes, this is it. This is called the leaf sheep, and it is a type of slug, if I'm correct. Let me see if I can find the proper description, because that would, of course, be yeah, it's a leaf slug or a leaf sheep, and it lives. It's a succoglossan sea slug, so it lives in the sea. And I saw this in a video of Bizarre Beasts, and this photo, by the way, is made by Christian Glor, or Glor. I'm not entirely sure how his last name is pronounced. The way it is written, my initial thought is it's a Dutch fellow, but I have no idea. Here is his page with many more photos that he makes. He's a underwater photographer and an astrophotographer since a while. He made this photo of the leaf sheep. It's so cute. It's so cute. And I will see if I can find the video of Bizarre Beasts, because it was so fun to see. Let me see. It was fairly recent, yes. This one. I will link it in the chat as well. And I'll put it in the description or in the pinned comments later on, so that you can check it out. This is called "These Sea Slugs Are Thieves," but it's so fun. It's such a cute creature. So this is the last writing prompt I want to give you guys. So have fun with it and see how your character can use it. I think I might feature it in Tergaenae Chronicles at one point. It might not even be a sea creature in Tergaenae Chronicles. I have the tendency to get creatures completely out of their normal living environments and do something completely different with them. So yeah, I might do that, or I might just blow it up, let it live in the sea, and just blow it up. I mean, this is a tiny creature, but I might blow it up for the Tergaenae Chronicles. I have no idea yet. So yeah, use this as your writing prompt. Your character finds this little creature. How does she find it? What does she do with it? Why does she find it? Where she finds it? And so, of course, the question also is, where does she find this creature? What does she do with it? Is she researching it? Is it just by chance that she finds it while diving? Um, anything at all. Um, Use it and see how that can help you with your next scene. So I wish you a lot of fun. Um, I will see if I can include it in the sprint in a moment as well, so that you can keep an eye on it. I wish you all a lot of fun with this last writing sprint, and I will see you in 25 minutes. Have fun, happy writing. That might be the correct. Yes, with this link, with this last link, you will get the page of Christian Chlor. My apologies for the interruption.
And that is the end of our last writing sprint. How did it go for you guys? Oh, let me remove that one again. So that's better. How did it go for you guys? I managed to write further into my outline, and I wrote some pieces for about 3 chapters. It took me a little while to figure a few things out, to decide on a few things. Like I said earlier, I didn't expect to show anything from Rowena and her husband's travel from the White City entirely up to Dragon City, and that turns out to be correct indeed. But we do see them arriving in Devil's Port, and a little background about Devil's Port. Devil's Port, I think, at least I didn't really tell you guys anything about that. Devil's Port is a big trading hub in the south of Natawan. It's essentially you have Devil's Port in the south, and there is another trading hub, which I think I gave a name, but I'm not entirely sure anymore. But there's a dragon or an dragon. There's a trading hub in the north as well, south of the White Mountains, and it's at the coast as well. I did mention it, I think. Well, rather, I know I mentioned it in the original first book I wrote, because Isla was there in that trading hub, or she was. It was mentioned that she has been there, if I remember correctly. Anyways, Devil's Port is a big trading hub in the south of Natoan, and it has several, or I should rephrase that. There are several goods that are traded there that make their way into Natoan, and that won't go through that other trading hub, because it simply takes too much time, and it would be too risky to sail it further up north to that other trading hub, because that other trading hub is quite far away. So because things could get lost at sea, and that is of course something that traders would like to avoid. So instead of sailing further up north to that other trading hub, they try to sell their wares in Devil's Port. Now, how did Devil's Port get its name? There's no devil, or rather, it's not called a devil in Tergaenae, or at least I haven't discovered it yet. Let me put it that way. But Devil's Port was originally a simple mention from a trader, from a wealthy trader called Deville, and he built a harbor, originally just a few docks, to get his own ships there, to make sure that he could receive his goods from other places. There is a very treacherous entrance, so he made sure to hire very good, let's say, pilots, because that's what we have here on Earth as well. But very good captains, pilots who know how to navigate those waters, because otherwise the ships would simply just crash, which of course isn't good. But anyways, he built that. He built his mansion. He built those docks right there, and you would think, why would he build it in a location that cannot easily be reached by ships unless you know those waters? Well, exactly because of that. Because it's not
as likely for pirates and other thugs and how do you call them, to raid the harbor. So in essence, by choosing that harbor to be there, it's safer for it's safer to be there. And he made sure that there were several captains who would be able to sail the ships into the harbor safely, um, and be able to trade there. So that is why he chose that location. And slowly but surely, it became from originally more like a warehouse situation, his mansion with warehouses, to a bustling trading hub, and that is how it grew. And Devil's Port has been there for ages. I mean, it's essentially one of the main entrances to Dragon City, and Devil's Port has been, I don't know, there it has been there for centuries, if not longer. So slowly through time, his original name, the Ville's Port, became the Devil's Port, simply because that's how it works. People just began to shorten it because it was easier to pronounce it. And that is how it became Devil's Port. So it has nothing to do with the devil, but it has everything to do with the original name of the original owner of the mansion and the harbor there, and the person who started it all, who started the trading hub. In Devil's Port, we meet Rowena and her husband, who have just arrived there. I have not yet discovered if they have arrived by ship, because that would not entirely be logical. But at the same time, it can be. But I don't think they arrived by ship, but I guess I will find out when I start to write the chapter. And one of the fun things about Devil's Port is, like I said, in Devil's Port there are people trade things there because they don't want to travel all the way up to the sea, all the way up north over the sea, and trade in that other trading hub. Which also means that certain things are much easier to get in Devil's Port, and most certainly much cheaper to get in Devil's Port than in, let's say, Crossroads, or which is not the trading hub, Crossroads or the trading hub or the White City or in the north. So Rowena and her husband arrived in Devil's Port, and the first thing the first thing Rowena does after she disembarked the ship, was not checking her luggage, because she lets her husband do that. No, she goes to the market, and her husband knows that, so he lets her do her thing. She goes to the market and she searches for herbs that she wants and other things that she wants and needs, which in turn they can take back to the White City later on. So basically she pretty much gets all the herbs that she wants in probably higher stocks than she might need, but at the same time she knows that she'd better get them in higher stocks in Devil's Port and take them back to the White City later on, and have that stock in the White City once they get there, than having to buy that in the White City. I mean, certain herbs she buys in Devil's Port can be bought in the White City, but they are grown in greenhouses. Yes, Tergaenae has greenhouses, but it's not like the greenhouses we have here. So those are magical greenhouses. So they are far more expensive, and they are not as good as the original herbs that can be gotten from the wild, that can be harvested in the wild. So that is why she prefers to buy her stocks in Devilsport. And it might even be so. I don't know yet. I'll have to do some more digging and probably have an extensive interview with her. It might even be the case that her visits to Devilsport are um, not rare. It might be that she travels to Devilsport together with her husband a few times a year, depending on how long it takes to go, how long the travel time takes. I don't know that yet. I mean, if it takes a few months, then it wouldn't be logical to have her travel through between those two places several times a year. I mean, once, twice, twice, maybe once, yeah, but twice, maybe, but certainly not more if it were to be months. I don't necessarily think it's months, but at least weeks. So that's something I still need to discover. I'll need to check into that. But I expect her to come to Devilsport on a at least yearly basis, and so she stocks up on herbs and other things that she really needs as a healer, but also personal things that she would have to pay for a lot more in the White City or in Crossroads or in that other trading hub of which I don't remember the name right now. So yeah, we see Rowena and her husband arriving, and there might be a mention of things going on in the White City, but I don't expect that we will go to the White City anytime soon. What we will see, and that's a fun thing, is the Blue Jays Tavern. Um, the Blue Jays Tavern is something I found in one of the previous live streams where we talked about naming of locations, and the Blue Jays Tavern was one of the locations I named right there and then, and I found it, and it's such an ideal location, and it's so fun. And Rowena and her husband are most definitely going to stay there for at least a day and a night. They might even stay 2 days, 2 nights. And from there, they will move on to Dragon City and meet another healer in Dragon City. So that will be fun. So that is what I found up until now in the outline. And then I see that even though I do have things in mind, and I do already have, or not do already have, although I already have a part of the series written. I mean, the original book, the original first book, I had already written for a greater part. And now I see other things that can have a very interesting influence on the later part, and I already see it right now. I mean, I'm now at chapter 13. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see how my outline is evolving and how characters are coming up. Characters that need to be there. I mean, don't get me wrong, Rowena and her husband needed to be there, need to be in Dragon City. But it's interesting to see them turning up here and see what especially Rowena is doing, because I mean you disembark, and what's the first thing you do? You've been traveling for potentially for weeks. She disembarks, or if it's from a ship or from a carriage, I pretty much don't care at the moment. Right now, that's something I will find out while writing. Um, she's been traveling for weeks, I assume. Um, and I mean, if I've been traveling for weeks, if I've been traveling for I don't know, a day, 2 days. I remember that when I went to Indonesia several years ago, I was exhausted when we finally arrived. Um, so the first thing you might want to do is just sleep. I think we arrived at some time during the day, so we didn't get to sleep yet. And back when we went to the United States, it was kind of the same. So we couldn't get sleep yet. So we went along with the flow of the time right there. Um, but I do remember that I was quite exhausted from traveling. So going to the markets of all places as a first thing, I mean, that was not quite on my mind. But Rowena does it, and that's interesting. I did not see that one coming. So, and that's just, I mean, that's just in the outline. My characters just surprise me already in the outline, and I'm not even writing the chapter yet. So this is going to be very interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to writing this chapter, because I think Rowena is going to surprise me a lot more in this chapter. So yeah, and Naja and her team were originally, and I forgot about that. They were originally not going to Devilsport. They were originally going to a place higher up, further up north on H1, because they needed to be there. But the mission changed, or rather, they got another mission, and now they needed to go to Devilsport. Luckily enough, the captain is willing to drop them off at Devilsport for, of course, an extra fee. So these are the tiny details I will include in the outline. I do include in the outline, because that is important information for me. The mission changed, or rather, she got a new mission, she and her team, and she needs to negotiate things with the captain of the ship, because originally their destination was different. So they need to renegotiate, and of course there will be an extra fee. I will have to figure out while writing the chapter what the extra fee will be, in what form, etc., etc. So yeah, that's how things evolved for me during this last writing sprint. I hope you guys had a lot of fun writing your story and writing this last scene, and I hope that you were able to use the leaf sheep in some way. Like I said, this will be featured in one way or another in Tergaenae. I'll figure out how. That's just a part of world building I need to do. Sometimes I see little things like that, of which I just know that I am going to include it in one way or another, even if the story doesn't need it. I feel my world needs it, and it's like with the Flutter Nymphs. They were originally not part of Tergaenae, but they just came up, and now they are a very important part of Tergaenae, and it is what makes the world magical. And I feel that the leaf sheep are in that same category. So they won't be those tiny sea slugs that you find when you go diving in the sea. Most certainly not. They will be far more recognizable. So I don't know yet. I don't know yet how we will see them, but they are most certainly going to be featured in the Tergaenae Chronicles. Simply because I like them. I mean, it was so fun. I mean, look at them. Um, I mean, how can you not like such a little creature? So yeah, it's most definitely going to be featured in Tergaenae. Um, and it might just be just a simple mention. It might be that I don't know. They see a whole flock of these or a whole group of these creatures. I've no idea yet, but yeah, they are most definitely going to be part of Tergaenae. Um, so yeah, that is the development so far. Will I start writing? Not yet. Not yet. Um, I really first want to develop the outline further. Um, right now, I'm not even that far that Najat is leaving for that southern town, etc. I'm not even that far that I can include everything I have written in the last few months about Naja and Najat. That's I'm not that far yet. So I will keep on developing the outline and include those sections. I mean, it's about 40,000 words that I need to cut up and make into chapters. I'm not the hardest part is the fact that I have written that piece. I have written those 40,000 words in the last few months, with the idea in my head that it would simply be a background story, and I wouldn't need several chapters or whatever. I would just write it, and that was it. And at some point, I decided, okay, this is not a background chapter anymore. This or a background story anymore. This is really the beginning of the series. And now I need to figure out where I am going to include which parts I have already written. And with everything I have already written, I want to include that. But I will have to see how I can include them in the handiest way. And also, I mean, it would be weird to include that whole piece of text of 40,000 words at some point in this outline, while and as a whole block of text, while I have been writing this outline chapter by chapter, point of view, with a point of view per chapter, where we see Naja, where we see Rowena, where we see Naja's father, where we see the king and queen of the dragon companions. I can't simply say, okay, we've seen all those point of views, and then we get only everything from Najat. That I mean, we can't. I can't do that. I mean, I can't have all those point of views that are important, point of views that are essential to the story also, and then just have chapter upon chapter all from Najat's point of view, and have those 40,000 words. It's not going to work like that. So I'll have to think about that, and maybe I will have to cut things in the future. I may have to cut things out. I don't know yet, but right now I do know that I need to cut up things, and that I need to make bridges to other point of views in other parts of the world, being in Dragon City or Nasha's Kingdom, etc., etc., depending on where the characters are. But yeah, I need to do that to make it far more logical. That is a true challenge when you originally had in mind to just make it a background story and nothing more, and not make it a part of your story, and then at some point decide, well, this is far more than a background story. This needs to be part of the story, and then you need to work on that. Then you suddenly need to think about, okay, this is going to be part of the story. Either I am going to write the whole story from one point of view, or I'm going to have to cut everything up, make the transitions to other point of views, make logical points of transitions. And I have to be honest, with everything I've written, I know that's not going to be easy. There are not many really logical points of transitions currently in that story, in what was originally supposed to be the background story. There are currently no logical points to do that. So once I have decided how I want to cut it up, I know that I will need to adjust those parts in the future once I start writing the whole series, once I start writing from the outline that I have made, and the earlier chapters and things like that, because it needs to be done. So I have made myself a challenge. I've made it quite complicated for myself, and I know that. The moment I decided that the background story was going to be essentially going to be the first part of the series, the background story of Naja and Najat's relationship, that is the moment that I knew, okay, now I'm going to make things really complicated for myself as the author. But it is going to make the story a lot better, or at least that is what I feel right now, and I hope that you guys later on will see that and will feel the same. But it means that I have so much work to do once I have decided on the outline, and once I have decided where to put the cuts in the background story. And of course, not only the background story, but also that originally first book that I have written, of which I have written a large part already. I will need to cut that up as well, and I will need to make the transitions to the proper point of views that are not included in that book yet. I mean, there's no Naja, there's no Najat, there's no Rowena. Well, Rowena is there. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. Rowena is there in a fashion. But there are a lot of characters who are part right now of the outline of the outline I'm writing right now, and of the background story of Naja and Najat's relationship. Characters that were not part of the original first story yet. They were not part of the entire outline yet. So I have a lot of work ahead of me. And I mean, that may seem daunting. And I have to admit, in a way, it is daunting. Because it is a lot of work I'll need to do. It is a lot of checking I need to do. I will need to keep proper track of things. Luckily, as I explained in my other video about how to set up your fantasy project in Scrivener, I have ways to do that now. To properly keep track of things. But it's not easy. I mean, you have to remember to include that information in certain documents, in certain files. to make sure that things are foreshadowed, to make sure that all the character information is there where it needs to be, things like that. There is a lot of work involved, and knowing me, knowing myself, I will need to do that work, simply because if I don't do that, the story will not be as good as I want it to be, and I think I might write myself into a corner again. Um, and that is something that I really want to prevent happening again, because that's not a situation you want to be in twice. Once was already more than enough. Twice, no, no. That in one way or another, I'm going to prevent that. Um, so yeah, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge to include everything I have already written into the outline I'm writing right now. It's going to be a challenge to keep track of everything, to keep track of all my characters, to keep track of all the events, to keep track of all the foreshadowing, especially the foreshadowing, because there is already in these 13 chapters that I now have in the outline, there is already so much that I marked to be properly foreshadowed, to that I marked to be in a foreshadowing document, and of which I know, okay, that's going to play on later on in the series, um, and pieces where I now think, okay, am I going to use this point of view or am I going to use that point of view? If I use that point of view, won't I already give away way too much? Um, these are all things I need to think about. At the same time, this may sound weird, but I already know that I have so much to think about, and at the same time, I'm essentially still writing my draft zero, my sandbox version of my entire series. So that's really a big challenge. Um, just knowing that there is so much that I need to keep track of, and so much that I need to think about, not only in the outline but also while writing. While I'm just writing the sandbox version, I mean, I'm just throwing in all the characters and all the events and all the tiny details that I think might come in handy. But I'm just throwing it in the sandbox to later make the story. And I already know right now in this version that several things need to be foreshadowed, and I'm already marking them to be foreshadowed, or to that at this point this is foreshadowing for the future. And if I use this point of view, um, I might possibly give away too much. So should I use that other point of view? That's something I'm already right now thinking about while I'm writing my sandbox version. So yeah, I'm making things complicated for myself. But at the same time, it's a fun challenge, and it may seem daunting, but at the same time, it's how shall I say that? It's daunting and it's not. It's a challenge, but it doesn't. It's a challenge. It's daunting, but it doesn't bring that negative feeling. It brings more of an exciting feeling that, okay, I'm gonna pick up the glove and I'm going to go ahead on with this challenge, and I'm gonna make it. Uh, and that is also one of the fun things I find in our crafts, and what I said earlier, the craft of writing. Um, if you find yourself in such a situation, you either pick up the glove and take the challenge, or you just throw it all down and you start something completely different. And in this case, Tergaenae has been such an important part of my life already for the last several years. It's been quite a while already. It's been really several years, um, and it has developed so much, and this story and these characters have already developed so much that I simply do not have a choice. And it's not meant in a negative way. I feel that I have no other choice but to keep on going and to write this outline and to include everything that I have already written and to make sure that the transitions will be correct and at the proper moments and the correct transitions to the proper point of views. Um, it's like this world and this story, they are so much alive for me that I simply do not have any other option but to keep on going. And I do not feel it as something negative. I feel it as something positive. It's for me it is a creative outlet. It is a creative project that I love. I mean, I love Tergaenae. I love the story, and even though I have made it really, really complicated for myself as the author, um, I really love it. And I know I have an enormous amount of work for me ahead of me, but I don't care about that. I love it. So yeah, the advice I can give you, if you find yourself in a similar situation, be it an entire series like I'm writing right now, or a smaller project, but if you find yourself in a similar situation where you find that you are standing before a daunting task, see if this task ahead of you gives you energy. Does this task make you feel excited? If it does, go ahead and take it with both hands and do everything you can to make it work. If the daunting feeling is a negative feeling for you, and instead of bringing excitement, it brings anxiousness and it brings, well, fear is maybe a big word, but anxiety, yeah, fear. Let me put it that way. If it brings that, then just put it aside for a moment and work on something else. Work on something smaller or with less impact, and return to your story later on. It will still be there. It will not leave you. It will still be there. But at a later point in time, you might find yourself suited way more better to write the story. And that is what I find for myself right now. I had to go through several things to get here. And that it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. But this is so exciting. It's exciting to be able to write this and to have the privilege to write this. I mean, I don't even care if it well, sorta, if it gets published or not. Well, I mean, I would love to have it published, and I've said for a long time already, not always, but for a long time already, I've said if I can't get it published through traditional publishing, through one of the bigger publishers, then I will publish it myself, one way or another. It won't be easy, I know that, but this story deserves to be published. This story deserves to be brought to you guys, to the audience, to the readers. And I hope that I will be able to do that in the future, one way or another. So, again, if you find yourself confronted with such a task, see if you find the task exciting. If you do, then grab it with both hands and start writing and get creative, and also ask for help. I mean, it may be said that writing is a lonely business, but in fact it isn't. I mean, you write the words, but it's not. I mean, it's not forbidden to ask help, to ask sparring partners, to ask the help of sparring partners, I should say, and also your first drafts is not your final version. I mean, if I look at Tergaenae Chronicles, it's been through several development stages already, um, in one way or another, and it has made the story better, and it has made the characters better, and that is what I like about it. And for me, it was essential to have a sparring partner, to have multiple sparring partners, to be able to talk about it with my writing partners, and I love that. And of course, it may not be something for everyone, but know that you do not need to be alone as a writer, as an author. People may say that, but that's not it. It's simply not true. You're not alone as an author. And it's not only that, for example, during the month of November, we all write. No, it's that we offer support to each other, we help each other, we're sparring partners, we can give constructive criticism, we can be sensitivity readers, we can be beta readers, alpha readers, whatever you need. That is where we can help each other. I mean, sure, you write your story, so do I, but if we would stick to the fact that, or to the idea that an author is a lonely job, then essentially everyone, because an author is someone who writes, so policymakers and, I mean, everyone you think of who writes would have a very lonely job, while in fact policymakers who write policy documents, I know that because I've done it in the past. I mean, we talk with so many people before we form that document, and other people read that document and give comments to it, and we adjust it, and etc. etc. Being an author is not a lonely job. You start with something and you get constructive criticism, you get comments, you get questions, everything, and that helps you make your story, your work better. And that is what is important, and that is why it is important to keep in touch with everyone. And I encourage you to participate in the chats during the live streams, and to leave comments if you have questions. If you have questions about writing, or about how you can progress with your character or with your story, if you find yourself in a hurdle, feel free to leave comments, and I'm happy to help you. And if you find that the fantasy button chair tavern Discord might be something for you, feel free to join in the chat, and feel free to join our Discord. Link is in the description below, and we're happy to help you. The fantasy butt in the chair tavern is a very welcome and very helpful community, and we love having people there who want to improve their craft, and who want to how shall I say that? Who want to improve their craft, who want to help each other improve their crafts, and that's the beauty of writing. That's the beauty of it. So with that, I leave you guys. I had a wonderful time today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend with a lot of writing ahead. Um, I probably will be writing more in the outline, but I will also be working this weekend on the next writing prompts video, the writing prompts Monday video. So keep an eye on my channel. Next Monday, I will post a new video with new writing prompts at 3 p.m. Central European Time, Amsterdam time. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel for that new video. And in the meantime, I wish you all a lot of fun writing and a wonderful weekend. And may the words flow and may your characters show their intentions or perhaps hide them from you to surprise you later on.